Well, a warm welcome to this UKIBC webinar in partnership with ICAEW and the Law Society. Today we're going to be focusing on the role of technology in the professional services sector. My name is Chris Hayes, as it says on the screen. You'll see that we're on webcams for the first time, which has meant that I've had to put a shirt on for the first time in about a month, but it feels good. I'm one of the directors at UKIBC. I head up the membership team. I am also the lead for the professional services sector. For my sins, I'm also a chartered management accountant, so this topic is something that's really close to my heart. You'll all be glad to know there's no distractions today. The kids are at school, so no need for me to barricade the door today. And as long as obviously I remember to turn my mute and unmute on, we should be in for another good webinar. This is one of the many webinars that UKIBC has been running over the lockdown and gradual unlocking period, ensuring that our network is kept up to date with key issues and topics of interest. Our last webinar was on the new national education policy in India. And prior to that, we have looked in depth at the Indian economy and at the UK economy post-COVID with some of our members. All of our webinars, of course, are available to watch on our YouTube channel and also via our website. To keep up to date, you'll be able to see all of our events and developments if you sign up for our newsletter. So you can do that on our website or follow us on LinkedIn. Just search for UK India Business Council, and Twitter, it's at UKIBC, as you can see on the screen right now. Before we start, as usual, a couple of housekeeping rules. You'll all be automatically placed on mute for the entire session, but you will notice in the left-hand or the right-hand side of your screen, there is the ability to type in questions, which I can then put to the panel at the end of the session. You can do this at any time during the presentation, so feel free to do that. Don't be putting your questions in at 28 minutes past, as we normally have a flurry and then we unfortunately can't get to them. You'll also be glad to know that we're recording this session, which will be then placed on our website afterwards. You'll all be emailed a link, which you can then use to look at any sections that you want to re-listen to, or also if you want to share that with your network, feel free to do that. So the subject today is technology and how it's playing an even bigger part of our lives. I think not a day goes past where we all say, sorry, I think you're on mute, or we didn't quite catch that, we lost you for a second, as the internet tries to keep up with this technological advancements that's happening. C19 has only accelerated the adoption of new technologies, and there seems to be a new virtual collaboration tool coming on board and on stream almost on a monthly basis. Today, we're going to delve deep into the impact that these new technologies are having on two of our key professional services sectors, the accountants and the lawyers. Many would argue that these two professions have been at the forefront of this new technology for years. As an accountant, I've seen firsthand the implementation of cloud-based software and AI being used for a number of key areas across the accountancy. Lawyers are also being ahead of the game, using OCR, optical character recognition, for a number of years, and more recently, the introduction of AI to review those super exciting 50 pages of terms and conditions, which we all used to love to read. Now the bots can go through them and highlight the key areas that there needs to be reviewed by the lawyers, focusing their time and efforts down there. To help us look at these sectors in more detail, we've got two great speakers, as you can see on the screen. First up is Kirstin Gillon. She is the Tech Faculty Research Lead for ICAEW, so the Institute of Chartered Accountants for England and Wales. Kirstin joined ICAEW from PwC's IT consultancy practice and previously worked at IBM as a project manager and a business analyst, so a huge understanding of this area. She plays a leading role in ICAEW's thought leadership program and technology in the profession, and her research and analysis on how technology trends are being used in areas such as big data, AI, and cybersecurity are influencing the businesses and the accountancy profession. She's recently published a number of articles, including Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Accountancy and the Automation of the Finance Functions, Lessons from India to the UK. Kirstin, it's really glad to have you here and looking forward to your presentation. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Chris. Pleasure to be here and good morning to everybody. So as Chris said, I work in ICAEW's Tech Faculty And we are, I guess, the focal point for the Institute's research and thinking and work and activities around technology and the profession. So hopefully in my 10 minutes, I'm going to just give a bit of an overview of the story we tell, some of the key technologies that we're looking at, and then delve into a bit more detail on the recent research report we've done in conjunction with the Indian Institute on the impact of automation, particularly on accountants working in finance functions and business. So as Chris said, there's nothing new about technology in the accountancy profession. We've been adopting new technologies for many, many years, from business computing all the way back to spreadsheets to ERP systems. So we've been a profession that has always been very adaptive and very innovative with technology. But I think we're probably in a phase at the moment where the pace of change is probably much faster than we've ever seen before. There's a proliferation of technologies. There's just so much out there. I think one of the biggest questions I usually get from our members is, where on earth do we start? What do we want to look at? There's just so much choice and there's so much out there. So trying to make sense of that is really challenging. And of course, it's affecting accountants in all aspects of the profession. As an institute, we speak to members in big organizations and small organizations, and business and practice, there's an audit, tax. I mean, there's a very broad church of members, and technology is affecting all of them. And the high level story is pretty much the same, which is that this is a positive opportunity. We always take the view that it's a great opportunity for the profession to add more value, to fundamentally spend less time doing bookkeeping, compliance, process orientated work, and to shift much more into advisory work. For those in business, working more on business partnering, on strategy, spending less time compiling reports and spending more time getting insight from the data and helping decision makers make good decisions, and also bringing some of the kind of legacy of the profession around trust in data, around assurance of data, to a much broader world. So that's our kind of positioning, and I think we recognise there is still a lot of concerns about jobs in particular. And I speak to a lot of students, and I hear the number one question I usually get asked about 6 times in different ways is, are there going to be any jobs in accounting in 10 years? It's still a perception that the robots are coming to take the jobs, and that's absolutely not what we're seeing. What we're seeing is changing roles and a change in what accountants are doing, and I'll talk more about that. But the overwhelming kind of narrative and perspective of most of our members is very positive in terms of technology. And of course, as Chris said, that's been accelerated by the last 6 months, where digital transformation has just been everywhere. So moving into the next slide, I was just going to highlight and give a flavour of some of the key trends that we talk about a lot to our members. At ICAEW, we've had this mnemonic ABCD, so it's nice and easy for everyone to remember around what are the key technology trends, maybe the most important ones, the ones that ask some of the biggest questions around the profession. AI obviously has been talked about an awful lot, and we certainly do see some uses of AI. It's by no means widespread and being used at scale in all organizations, but there is certainly a lot of interest, a lot of use, particularly in the world of audit, using machine learning to identify anomalies in data and anomalies in transactions. A lot of emphasis on that. A lot of emphasis on, it said, the reading technologies, looking at documents, some recent interest in natural language generation, automating report writing, for example, things like that, as well as a great emphasis on forecasting and the ability of machine learning, its predictive abilities to help us with our forecasting much more effectively. So there's lots of interest, probably still early stages, but certainly something I think over the medium term is going to be a big focus. We have blockchain, not that anyone's particularly using it to any extent, but it is a potentially quite radical technology for the profession, because it is ultimately a bookkeeping technology, a different way of recording transactions. So if the world were to move into blockchain as a way of doing things, it would have quite a radical impact on how we keep the books and how you audit that. So it's quite important for us conceptually, but there's not a lot of practical use. Obviously, cybersecurity is everywhere. That has to be at the forefront of everything we talk about when we talk about technology. And then data is really, again, I can see it's kind of the big opportunity for accountants. Accountants are finance data professionals. That's what they've done for years. They've got insight from data. So this is around using more data. Auditors analysing all the transactions, not just samples. It's around looking at non-financial data. It's about more forward-looking analysis. And again, bringing those ideas of trust into other aspects of data. So those are the key trends. And if in terms of what we're talking about most to our members, it's cyber, it's data, and then it's automation. Those are the 3 things that in practice people are most interested in at the moment, and a wide range of automation tools, including robotics, but lots of other tools as well. And then, as Chris said, finally, cloud continues to be a hot topic. We've been talking about it for years. but it's a really important kind of underpinning for everything else. So we continue to talk about the shift into cloud accounting and how that enables automation, enables more advisory services, all that kind of stuff. So that's an overview of the trends. Moving into the report we published recently with the Indian Institute of Chartered Accountants. This was a really collaborative effort looking at companies both in India and in the UK. And we thought that working together in this specific topic was really valuable, because actually when you're looking at automation, what you're looking for is high volume transactions. And actually an awful lot of that work is not really done in the UK anymore. It's all being offshored and outsourced and done in India. So when we speak to finance functions here and say, where are you using robotics? Where are the business cases for using robotics? Not necessarily that much stuff here. A lot of that actual implementation is going on in companies in India. So the ability to speak to members here at large companies like Johnson & Johnson, Boots, but then also to speak to TCS and Mahindra and some of the companies over there around what they were doing was a really valuable collaboration between the two institutes in a way of sharing our experience. And just a few key messages. It is available free if you want to. You don't need to be an institute member. It's freely available if you want to go and have a look for it. And just a few key messages. Firstly, just brings out how important automation is, just to underpin that wider digital transformation. I mean, yes, there's efficiency and productivity saving, and yes, it helps in terms of accuracy and risk, and particularly in India, with the complexity of the compliance environment, the more automation you can get in there is hugely important. But actually, it's about freeing up time and helping people to move into different areas and to spend time more on analysis and to spend less time moving things from spreadsheet to spreadsheet and doing data entry and that kind of stuff, which a lot of people in finance functions are still spending time doing. So it is about enabling that shift and helping business to have the data, automated data flows, real-time data, having access to that data quickly that they need. I think in terms of delivery, what comes out very much as automation is actually very targeted. It's often very small scale. It's very much focused on pain points, often very much agile methodologies, very much small scale, incremental change. It's not big ticket stuff. It's very much the finance experts and the tech experts working closely together, trying things out, really learning and building the best possible process. And that link to process improvement is also critical, because actually, you know, there's a trade-off and a balance between, do you automate or do you improve your process? Because a lot of the time automation is a sticking plaster. You've got a not very good process, you've got systems that aren't integrated, and all you're doing is replacing the person moving data around with a robot moving data around. And yes, that might be better, but actually maybe you want to change your process. So there's a lot of interplay with process improvement to really work out the best ways to implement the technology. And that really brings out how important it is for accountants to be really leading in this and to be aware of the market, thinking about the opportunities. This is not about the tech people coming along with, here are some tools you might want to use. This is very much about driven by the accountants, understanding their business needs, their pain points, where these tools can help, and then working with the IT people to deliver them. And that comes out very strongly. And then finally, we have the fact that automation obviously has a big impact on people. It does change jobs. I mean, there is undoubtedly a link with headcount, although again, in the research, that wasn't sort of a direct link. It was very much more about often people, you know, headcount has been reduced for other reasons, and then automation comes along as a way of helping people to cope and a way of improving ways of working. And more often it's about changing what jobs are doing, changing the emphasis of what tasks people do. So of course there's a big impact therefore on skills and behaviours. Just moving on to the final slide, we pulled together some of the themes around that. And I think certainly within ICAEW over the last few years, we spent a huge amount of time on that functional skill area, data skills, looking at tools, digital literacy, all that kind of stuff. We spent a huge amount of time upgrading our qualification. I can certainly happily talk a lot more about that in the Q&A around the kinds of skills and the level of knowledge that we kind of think accountants need, because again, there's lots of views on what accountants really need to know in that space. And I think we focused our efforts on that. But what comes across actually in the research is that what really matters is the behavioural attitudes and the attitudes and the mindset and the ways of working are actually, if anything, more important, because skills will change. The tools in 5 years or 10 years will be completely different. So there's a need to just constantly upskill and have that mentality of learning and upskilling, being adaptable, that idea of curiosity, taking risks, trying things out, not necessarily things you kind of come naturally to accountants. So there's quite a big shift in mindset around just seeing what data tells us. It's not about reporting, it's about experimenting and trying and learning from experience. So those kinds of mindsets and behaviours, collaboration, things like that, come out actually as, if anything, more important than the skills themselves, although obviously we spend a lot of time talking about the skills. So hopefully that's given a good flavour of some of the things we're talking about and some of the insights from our Indian report. And I'm happy to pick up on any of those in more detail in the Q&A. So I'll hand back to you, Chris.
Perfect. Thanks very much for that, Kirstin. Yeah, as you rightfully say, accountants are naturally conservative in terms of sort of, pushing the boundaries. But I think, over the recent years, that new set of skills that's come through, and as you mentioned, that sort of ability for accountants to actually be able to concentrate on what they want to do, which is actually analyzing the data and being able to make recommendations rather than actually creating the reports themselves. So huge area of interest, and I particularly like the ABCD. That will make it really easy for everyone to remember those key areas that we're looking at. So from the accountants over to the lawyers. So to look at the impact of the legal sector, I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Wright. He's a solicitor and managing director of digital law. Peter is the chair of the GDPR working group in the Law Society of England and Wales. He is also a member of the Law Society's Law Society board and a past chair of the Technology and Law Committee. He also chairs the Law Society's Policy and Regulatory Affairs Committee, managing the work of the Law Society's 30 legal policy and regulatory committees and providing overall strategic direction and vision. So I'm surprised we managed to get any of your time, Peter, with all of those different roles. He's also the author of the Law Society's Cybersecurity Toolkit, which is a practical compliance guide for law firms, and is co-author of the GDPR Practical Compliance Manual for Law Firms. Peter, really looking forward to your discussion as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and also thanks to Kirstin and ICAEW for taking part and supporting this great joint initiative with the Law Society of England and Wales, and special thanks to UK India Business Council for this partnership. We really appreciate the work that UKIBC is doing when it comes to India and being able to promote the partnerships that are possible between the jurisdiction of England and Wales and India, and it's great to be involved in this event. So thank you all very much indeed. I just wanted to share a few insights that we've had. We actually had a 2-day technology and law conference for the Law Society of England and Wales a couple of weeks back. And we got over 550 delegates from all over the world joining us in a virtual 2-day conference. So we had some great panels, some great discussions, and some great questions. As you can imagine, with so many delegates from all around the world joining us, it was a great couple of days just to sort of take a stock take really of some of the immense developments that have taken place both this year and also where the profession is going as a whole. And I suppose the first insight is just with regards to the fact that we've had this massive shift in terms of remote working this year, which was brought home to us when a speaker from one little law firm located in Berwick-on-Tweed, one of these places that's been in the same building for several centuries, they were telling us about how they had jumped into having a cloud-based client case management system. They were using that to communicate with their clients. They were ensuring they were doing everything securely. They were minimizing risk from the perspective of cybersecurity, but also they were listening carefully to their clients. And where in the past it might have been a matter of driving out to see the client, and if you're going to speak to someone in the agricultural sector, it's taking those Wellington boots in the boot of the car and going along and having a chat with them in person. Sometimes, time's short for them. They're actually wanting to just get things done quickly, and we're happy to do things in a more remote manner as well. So they had embraced using the technology, using video conferencing, and using other systems to allow them to work well and easily outside of the office, but also providing a good service to the clients. The clients are actually really open and susceptible to receiving. So I think sometimes part of the barrier, particularly with the delivery of legal services, is we have a set perception in terms of how we think the clients want to receive the service. And actually, when you sit down and ask the client, you actually find out that no, they don't necessarily want a hard copy letter. They don't necessarily want to have a conversation in person, and they're really open to more digital ways of moving ahead with service delivery. So as you can imagine, a lot of my insights are going to be similar to Kirstin's, because I'm going to be saying things like cloud. I'm going to be talking about data, and that, of course, is a big driver in here. And that's, I suppose, the second insight I wanted to look at was increased process automation. Now, I think sometimes young lawyers in particular get a bit worried thinking, oh, this is machines coming in and taking our jobs. But increased process automation is allowing greater efficiency within the running of firms, the delivery of services, and actually freeing lawyers up to be lawyers. Less form filling, less time spent on administration, less cost and less overhead there, because you can automate more of these things when it comes to the very important elements of compliance around things like money laundering and identification. But it means that then if you can have more processes automated, you actually can spend more time discussing things with the client, you can spend more time making sure that you are meeting what the client needs, and working collaboratively with other lawyers to make sure you're then delivering efficiently the final result. But in particular, that increased process automation is actually allowing the delivery of services in bulk more, in terms of efficiency, in terms of speed. Indeed, to a certain extent, I think the legal profession has been behind accounting in its general use of technology. And if we look at general strategic terms, you know, when the Apple II came along and introduced the spreadsheet in the early 1980s, suddenly that revolutionized the delivery of legal services, of accounting. You know, it meant that suddenly we didn't have to have it only being for the large organization or the high net worth individual. Suddenly it lowers the costs, and now anyone who wants to have a tax return very often going to go on to an accountant for some advice. Any SME will go to an accountant in a way that 30, 40 years ago simply wasn't the case. Now, because of the way that legal services work, I think only now that we've got these elements of AI and machine learning to help us, that we're now able to receive that same benefit and that same growth and boost to productivity from that increased process automation. So the application of AI in some increasingly sophisticated systems is really starting to provide real dividends in the way that services are delivered. It's also allowing us to go after the unmet legal need, the sort of 9 out of 10 legal issues that get nowhere near a law firm, a court, a tribunal, or an advice service. For example, areas like landlord and tenant, where it's law firms have retreated almost from offering services there because it's simply not cost effective to do so. But suddenly, if you can provide services in that area and be able to help clients out and provide that access to justice through sometimes using some automated processes, that's going to end up leading to a much better outcome for the client as a result. And then if they're happy with that service, they'll come back to you for other services. So I think we'll see a general expansion of the way that we can deliver services and provide that proper access to justice that I think too often clients simply have not in practical terms had, because we've had this sort of decrease over the years because it's seen as being so expensive. So, but along with then process automation, I think there's increased datafication as well, looking at the data to tell us things. In terms of other sources of information to look at, one thing I can highly recommend is a chap called Jack Newton, who's written a book called The Client-Centered Law Firm. And he talks about using technology to help you provide the services that a client wants. And he talks about the use of data. And he runs a Clio case management systems, which operates systems globally for law firms. And he actually produces every year a legal trends report. And this year, that legal trends report came out in June. Now, Clio doesn't have access to, you know, client information on its system. But in general terms, they're able to produce a legal trends report that, for example, just talked about the number of cases that were being opened. And in June, they were able to report, of course, a steep decline in cases being opened earlier in the year, all around the world, you know, April, May, suddenly March and April, a decline in cases. But their data was able to actually say there's a decline, and then we've already tracked the upturn, because they're able to see the fact that more cases were being opened, things were starting to move again, albeit we're still working under restrictions, the whole world is pretty much, but they could see a development, a change, and an improvement. And it was just great to see that when we'd had such a lot of negative news for so many months, to actually get some data to say, you know what, things are going to start moving again, was a great thing to hear. But it typifies the fact that we can now use data to tell us far more and help us when it comes to those strategic choices, the investments, the decisions, the direction that our businesses need to be moving in. And that means we can do everything from using data to help when it comes to mining legal texts, to help when it comes to legal research, when it comes to providing the information that lawyers need to give to their clients, as well as helping with that relationship between the lawyer and the client. So that increased use of datafication is, of course, a huge driver behind the increasing use of technology. In the meantime, in terms of structures, we're getting far more multidisciplinary work being delivered. We've already got legal disciplinary partnerships with barristers, advocates, lawyers all working together. Increasingly, we're starting to look at multidisciplinary professional teams where they'll be delivering other professional services. So that there's a gradual erosion, I think, of the barriers, certainly amongst the different legal professions and gradually amongst other professions as well. You're just getting firms that want to provide a service to a client and they're responding to what the client wants. And those traditional barriers are starting to be broken down increasingly. And in turn, then we're also getting more hybrid models in terms of way of working. We've got a great law tech sector in London and in England and Wales as a whole. Last year, I did a tour of going around to different law societies around the country, talking to lawyers about technology, but also taking some providers of law tech to speak to them and talk about some of the systems that are being developed, sometimes by young lawyers themselves. You know, we had one great system that was developed by young solicitors and young barristers working together to create a revolutionary tool to help when it comes to collaborative family law, to get rid of some of the form filling, which is a pain for the lawyers and difficult for the clients when you're going through a difficult emotional time anyway. You don't want to be sat there having to provide labyrinthine information over and over again to a lawyer. If you can do that collaboratively online and then still do it in a format that was helpful for the court, that will help. And they were developing some great systems to allow for that. So we're getting more of these sort of hybrids in terms of using technology, alternative business structures that are then able to embrace alternative forms of funding to allow for that investment of technology to develop the systems as a whole. So we're seeing that sort of development happening more and more and more. In the meantime, we've also got, I think, the future when it comes to skills. So increasingly, we've got things like smart contracts and blockchain, which Kirstin was talking about. And increasingly quite interesting developments there. But I think we also have to think about the future skills that our young lawyers need. So we've got the solicitor apprenticeship schemes that are being developed, and I'm pleased to say that the tuition of those students is unaffected in many of the institutions by the pandemic and the lockdown. They've been able to carry on studying, carry on learning, and they're being taught skills in terms of the use of technology, which is going to be so important in the future. We can't just rely on the traditional production line of people picking up just their traditional legal skills to deliver services. They need to understand technology. They'll need to understand things like blockchain, smart contracts, cryptocurrency, and all of these things to be able to work with what their clients will want and expect. So in terms of that diversity of skill, I think the fact that we've got solicitor apprenticeships developing over 6 years, 6-year life cycle to develop the skills of these young lawyers is incredibly important to make sure that they get the backgrounds that they need to be able to show the leadership in the profession that they will need in the future. And finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what the Law Society of England and Wales has been doing to sort of increase its collaboration in turn as far as India is concerned. And we've actually done quite a lot this year to make sure that we are sort of seizing the opportunity that while we're working digitally and online, there's still a lot that can be done. So even despite the uncertainty, we've done things like a Seizing the India Opportunity panel event back in March, and then we did another one in June, an India webinar with Charles Russell Speakley's and other Indian partner firms to talk about issues affecting the legal sector in India and the UK there. We've also done a webinar, and this is also available online, on what I was just talking about, the Solicitors Qualifying Examination developments and what's new. We did that in association with ICAEW, the International Association of Legal Professionals, so they could see how our qualification system is changing and some of the great opportunities that are opening up there. We also did that in partnership with the Society of Asian Lawyers and the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. And then we did another webinar in August with the Confederation of Indian Industry and Clyde & Co, looking at how to handle contractual disputes in the UK and Indian jurisdictions and the impact of COVID-19 on the legal sector in both countries. So we've been trying to produce as much digital content as possible, and we're still continuing to press ahead with things like outbound missions to India to meet key stakeholders in the legal sector. And we have to remember that, you know, even though there might be limitations on international travel at the moment, we can still promote digitally the great connectivity with the global legal services market and work with Indian firms, Indian organizations to be able to realize all of our international ambitions at a lower cost and hopefully a higher level of productivity. And I suppose we've always been promoting the fact that the UK is a very open jurisdiction of choice when it comes to the legal sector globally, and we're continuing to make sure that remains the case. We're working with government to do that. And I can also direct any listeners out there to the report on England and Wales, a world jurisdiction of choice, which the Law Society has recently been promoting. It sort of talks about the benefits of being able to resolve a lot of certainly contractual disputes and disputes that happen using the systems available here in England and Wales. So that really concludes my comments. I hope that's helpful, and I'm now really looking forward to the discussion. Back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, really helpful indeed. I think that whole area about lawyers understanding what their clients would like in terms of digital delivery, I think that's very relevant. I think a lot of us assume that clients want activities delivered in a certain way, and we're often surprised when they tell us that actually digital is the way that they would like that to be put forward. Just to remind everybody, the question and answer session is now open, so feel free to put your questions through and I'll put them to the panelists. I just wanted to start off really to talk, you both touched on skills obviously, and a huge sort of area. Obviously as a chartered accountant, I need to upgrade my skills every year, and data is obviously becoming more and more important as we look at that. But from your point of view, what are the skills that you see that are required now for the sort of the modern accountant, the modern lawyer, that perhaps weren't needed, say, 10 years ago? Kirstin, if I start off with you and then come to Peter.
I think if we're looking at what people need today, it's partly a general kind of digital literacy and just an awareness of digital technology and cloud. And there's a kind of an overview of how that all works and how that fits together. But I think the biggest area of more substantive skills is data, as we've said before. I think we've spent a lot of time as an institute speaking to employers and asking what they want from accountants and what we need to be training them, because obviously that's our core sort of mission, is sort of making sure that our qualification is correct. And we spent a little while thinking about how to embed in technology and what to do. Should we have a data analytics module, for example? And we, in the end, we've never gone down that route. What we've done is embed data and broader technologies, but particularly data and cyber as well, actually, in just every module. So every part of the training of an accountant will have aspects of data that are relevant to that particular part. And increasingly, the assessment is more focused on data. We're moving into assessing students using software, so they're actually given a bit of data and told to solve a problem using the data. They're actually testing their ability to use data, because that's what the firms want. And when it's particularly, say, the trainee accountants are doing their audits, what they're doing is working with data all the time. So data skills are the ones we see as probably the most important in terms of what people need now. I think a lot of the discussion is around, well, what does that actually mean? I mean, data skills is still a very broad topic. How much do you need to know? What tools do you need to know? And we've had lots of discussions, for example, around to what extent do accountants need to learn Python? There's a lot of Python training going on in the profession at the moment, and do accountants need that level of kind of real technical skill, or actually is it more about being able to understand the outputs, being able to use visualization tools effectively? How much of that kind of hardcore technical data skills you need, and how much is it more about understanding the outputs and being able to do the analytics? And there really is quite a wide range of views on the level of skill you need and the specific tools you need, and it probably varies to a large extent by role. Audit, as I said, is very data centric now, so actually accountants are spending a lot of time getting client data, cleaning up client data. They're doing a lot of data work, so they are looking a lot of the time for people with Python skills. They're not data scientists, not that level, but really strong data skills, where probably accountants in business, it's more about understanding the business problem. What is the data? How can that data help me answer that problem and provide more insight? So there's a range of views, but I think if you're looking at the key area that we're most focused on at the moment in terms of our qualification and in terms of our membership, we've got a data analytics community. It is around data, I would say.
And are you finding that's the same for you guys as well, Peter? Is it all sort of data focused, or there are other areas that lawyers need to be sort of looking at updating their skills on?
I would absolutely agree with everything that Kirstin said, that data is so important, and indeed having a lawyers who are relaxed around using technology and can see opportunities through its use is absolutely crucial. And I think it's something that we haven't necessarily embraced enough in the past, but certainly our young lawyers coming through now need to have not just the ability to handle data, to handle systems, and then to actually be innovative. They actually also need to be innovative and actually almost become leaders within their firms to then say, look, there are other ways of doing these things and we need to embrace them. And in terms, it's also a matter of sometimes saying to more senior lawyers, you need to actually be open to different ways of doing things. Just because we've done things the same way for the last 5, 10, 15 years doesn't mean that's going to be the way that it works in the future. And in particular, on the back of the changes this year, I think the pace of technological change throughout the 2020s is going to be a lot steeper than it would have been were it not for the pandemic this year, because we're simply seeing such a massive amount of technological adoption this year. I think it would have taken us 10 years to get to where we are now in October, really, because we've seen that level of technological adoption and change, not just within law firms, but amongst the clients that are out there as well. It's a total shift in mindset. And I think in terms of the skills that lawyers need, I mean, one of the key things, for example, is being able to identify where process automation can assist. So just to give you an example, my firm, Digital Law, we're working on a DocAssemble course that is available later this year. We're currently taking registrations for it. The idea being that you can learn how to use DocAssemble, which is a process tool that allows you to then use the technology to work out, well, where can we potentially streamline things? And we're doing this as part of a hackathon initially, just to sort of say, well, let's see how we can use this to promote better access to justice. So we're just looking for sort of law students out there, young lawyers, to come along, learn how to use the system, and then just enter a competition to think, well, how can you use this potentially to change the way a system is delivered? And I think that's a key element in terms of that shifting mindset, to think, how can you use technology to do this differently, rather than sometimes I think when we've been trained in the past, it's just, this is how it works, this is the system, this is the problem, this is how it's done. So it's changing that mindset that is so key, and that's as well where it fits in just with what I was saying before about solicitor apprenticeships as well. I think the young lawyers that are coming through will have a different approach in terms of how they approach problem solving as a result.
Fantastic. And sort of sticking on that sort of topic then, and just sort of thinking about the new normal, obviously there'll be so many accountants and so many lawyers now working from home. Obviously this presents to businesses the issue around cybersecurity, because obviously rather than having to secure, you know, one single location, you're having to work out how can you secure some multiple locations, multiple people working from home. And also, you know, as much as you know, webinars and Teams and Zoom meetings are fantastic, it doesn't sort of quite beat that interaction that you have. And I think more so for obviously for those young lawyers, those young accountants, or even those teams where accountants, you know, are having to place and lawyers are having to sort of advise clients. So how are you seeing that sort of you know, the profession is dealing with that, and how are they trying to replicate that collaboration, and on obviously how are they working in terms of making sure that all of that data is secure? Peter, if we start with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's a really important question, and it's been interesting. Again, I go back to our technology conference the other week. It was interesting speaking to those in different firms that I think a lot had, you know, switched immediately to remote working, digital working very, very quickly. Yeah. And I heard a lot of anecdotes of partners and offices working away, even at the height of the lockdown. And it was, I think the word splendid isolation came out a number of times, where you got lots, you know, the majority of people were working from home, some people preferred the office. You'll notice that I'm in the office, and we've switched to a sort of hybrid way of working of a few days in the office and a few days home. And the reason for that is that we found as a whole, I mean, I've got a lot of young lawyers in my firm, a lot of solicitor apprentices, funnily enough. And I found that while you think having a daily conference call or whatever is providing efficient management and leadership, we actually found that having a day or two in the office aided effective supervision, because there are conversations that you have, things that come up that simply will not happen, and people won't necessarily bring up in a conference call, that they will bring up face to face, even if that is face to face, 2 meters away, socially distanced, with huge amounts of hand sanitizer involved. So we've tended to find that hybrid works well, and even with the current guidance on, you know, work from home if you can, we felt that, okay, we have people working from home for the majority of the week, but we still feel that we need to have that little bit of time in the office in order for our business to run efficiently and for us to deliver our obligations in terms of training and supervision. So I think it's still key to have that, that sort of hybrid. The other thing as well is that whereas I think there's been a rapid adoption of technology, video conferencing, webinars, etc., we have to be careful how we use it. There's suddenly a temptation that every call is a video call. Really video conferences, sit down with your team and have a coffee and do it in a video. And suddenly, if you're not careful, you're spending too long using the technology and not actually enough time just allowing people to get on with the work. And the giveaway of that is when you then get the email at 2 in the morning from someone who's been trying to do conference calls, trying to do the work, probably trying to, you know, perhaps doing homeschooling for children and caring for vulnerable people. And you've got to think about the mental health aspects of asking people to do too much. So I think we have to use the technology, but also be considered in how we apply it as well.
No, I think that's completely right. I mean, funny enough, I've noticed the trend now for the shorter meetings. I have team meetings, you know, with the membership team at UKIBC twice a week, and it's 15 minutes long. That's it, 15-minute meeting straight in. But yeah, as you say, Peter, nothing beats that sort of those conversations where people are more likely to talk to you and bring activities together in an office environment. But I think that hybrid environment that we're in at the moment seems to be here to stay, and I think there will be a lot less business travel. I think people are now questioning, you know, could I have done this meeting? Do I need to do this meeting face to face? And that will be obviously, even when restrictions are reduced, I think that will be a key area, particularly those people that are traveling all over. One of our organizations we work with, Vicky, they were saying that, you know, they have their sort of global sort of leadership meeting. Everybody flies into Delhi, and now they're doing it online. I'm sure that will be the same case moving forward. Kirstin, what's your sort of thoughts on the collaboration side and the cybersecurity side?
Yeah, no, I think our experience is pretty similar, really. I think in the first instance, the kind of shift to home working, certainly with the firms we speak to, and obviously as we're in the tech faculties, we tend to speak to the tech and savvy firms. So I think they did feel the benefits of having invested in technology over the last few years. There's been a lot of investment in cloud and all this kind of stuff. And I think they found the switch in terms of the technology and the ability to work and be productive incredibly easy. The issues were cybersecurity. Absolutely, there's been a lot of focus on cybersecurity, and both in terms of devices and also just in terms of people and training and awareness. And there's been a real stepping up of helping staff, you know, watch out for phishing emails and all that kind of stuff. So absolutely, there's been a big focus on cyber. And really, all the issues have been more about social ones and isolation and childcare and things like that. They haven't been about actually the work. It's been helping to support people and people's well-being. And as you said, a lot of the firms have been coming out of that. They've been moving into a blended model. I think the expectation in the long run is that people will still come to the office, but the role of the office will change. It'll be less about coming into the office to sit and do emails and do your work, and more about coming into the office for team meetings, to have that sense of identity and kind of your purpose as an organization. You need to get together to do that, you know, particularly with new people and things. It's very hard to maintain that sense of vision and purpose when everyone's separate. So the role of the office will change, and I think absolutely I agree, younger members of staff, both in terms of their ability to work at home is often very limited, and the ability to train, mentor, coach, that's very difficult to do remotely. So I think that's where the biggest thinking is going on around how you end up with that blended model, because as a profession, most people, young people, join kind of now. When the lockdown happened, we weren't really having new starters in the same way that it all kind of kicks off at the moment. So that's, I guess, some of the issues, and I'll look forward to hearing the feedback from the firms as to how they're coping with that and the kinds of mechanisms they're doing in terms of keeping Teams channels constantly open, trying to do things virtually. But I don't think you're ever going to get away from the need also to get people into the office just to have that sharing of knowledge and just being around people when they're doing things and seeing what they're doing. I think you can't replicate that remotely. So I think that definitely is a key priority of trying to work out how you do that and how you bring in new people, younger people, train them, and just generally how the blended model works. I think everyone online seems to work fine, albeit, as you said, shorter periods is good. I think long days on days of video conferencing is really exhausting for everyone. So short things work well, and everyone in a room together works well. But the mix of the two is not necessarily very easy. So I think those kinds of blended approaches and how we do that, again, is going to be another particular area that people are looking on best ways to do that and to make that blend work best.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, isn't it? That sort of hybrid blend, because there's plenty of people, particularly in London, who obviously don't have that sort of space to have that home office environment. So there is a sort of that need to actually have somewhere to actually work in an efficient manner. And as you said, human need, the need to be around people to socialize. It's very much something that I'm missing, and having gone into the office a few times, it just builds that bit of routine as well, which is really nice as well. Just moving on to a question that we've got here. So we're sort of seeing more and more of emergence of a sort of multidisciplinary professional services now. So you'll notice that some of the big four obviously have their own law teams. Some of the big legal firms now have their own tax advisors, their own sort of accountancy professionals, particularly obviously as we emerge towards the sort of data area. Do you think these sort of disciplinary organizations, is that sort of a trend that you think that will continue moving forward, or is it just something that will be a sort of a short term? Kirstin, if we start with you.
Yeah, I think we are seeing a bit of it. As you said, we see it particularly in the large end. The big four have invested huge amounts in developing their legal practices and in legal tech and things. So we're seeing that very much at that end of the market. I think we've probably seen it less in, say, the mid-tiers. I think it's very much the large end of the market. But I think if you think logically about it as a client, it makes sense to go to one professional practice that can provide you a range of services rather than having to go to lots of different people. So I think from a client perspective, it makes a lot of sense. So I think that absolutely, I think it is a trend. I mean, we have seen accountants themselves, moving slightly more into legal areas like probate. We've seen a little bit of that, but that's going to be limited. So I think I think we've seen less of it moving down the chain. I think it's been largely in the big firms at the moment, but I'm sure it will be a trend certainly to keep an eye on and to see how that develops.
Yeah, and Peter, your thoughts?
I'd absolutely agree with that. Indeed, it's been a long-term trend with those with the larger accounting firms to end up providing some legal services. I think the big area for innovation is now going to be where you get law firms potentially taking on accountants, providing different services, providing different systems, and in the same way the accounting profession turning around and providing things where there is and in both respects, this is driven by the client need. I think we need to emphasize it's like exactly like Kirstin says. If it's easier for the client, it's going to be easier for you to get one invoice with the whole lot on, and you pay that, and you can budget for that, and you can have sort of clear, dependable budgets in place and service in place. That's going to be a big driver for organisations, and I think you'll see more and more clients potentially in the sort of SME sector then turning around and thinking, yes, this is something that we want to do as well. So I think it is indeed part of a long-term trend, and I think we'll certainly see it continuing.
Fantastic. And then the final question for today. A lot of the attendees that we've got on are business owners, so they're not accountants, they're not lawyers. What would be your sort of top tip to them in terms of sort of technological adoption, or the things that they should really be looking at which should actually bring efficiency into their business, or even the top thing that they should be asking their accountants or their lawyers to support them with? So Peter, maybe if we start with you. Obviously you advise lots of clients on a regular basis, but taking your legal hat off and putting your business owner hat on, what would you suggest to them?
I would say one of the key things, and I'm working at the moment with a lot of tech clients all around the world, because of course the digital sector is one of the things that is almost booming, because if you've got a lot of people who are stuck at home and all they can do is buy things online, or buy services or engage socially online, that's driving digital demand. And one of the big things we see there is the need to be able to demonstrate compliance with things like laws from GDPR to the California Consumer Privacy Act. And I end up having to sort of say to clients, the first thing you need to do really at the start of your digital journey as you develop your system is to have a data privacy impact assessment, whereby you look at the risks in terms of the handling of personal data and then build the system securely accordingly. So if I could direct everyone out there to just one thing, it would be, even if you look at this as a free thing that you want to do. The French data protection regulator, CNIL, C-N-I-L, has a free data protection impact assessment tool. So if you just Google CNIL, C-N-I-L, and then DPIA, it will take you to this free tool on the French data protection regulator's website, and at least guides you through the things to think about when it comes to a DPIA. And then if you think, actually, no, I either don't have the time or the resources, or I want to do this in a more joined up way, and I want to bring in some help, then that's when you can then go and get a proper DPIA from a law firm or other specialist. But I think it's important to think about these things at the outset of developing a system, website, app, or if you're going to do a big piece of procurement, or if you're going to be developing a new system, or you're going to be handling personal data, make sure you're looking at that regulatory piece first and not last.
Yeah, some great advice there, Peter. And Kirstin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to start, obviously, I think the first thing to look at is cloud. I think shifting into the cloud generally is a huge enabler, and there's so many apps and there's so many different things that you can do. So I think firstly is looking at, the cloud environment, and then getting there are so many things out there. So I think looking into communities or ways of sharing experience and learning what others are doing. We often find that when we spoke to finance functions, they said the most important people to learn from were fellow chartered accountants. And so finding ways of hooking into what other people are doing and what tools they're using and how they're doing it, I think is a really good way of learning, because vendors obviously want to sell you stuff, and that's absolutely fine, but actually having the experience of networks and joining networks and finding out what other people are doing, I think is a very valuable way of trying to focus your thinking on what might help, because I think the proliferation and just the level of choice is very hard. And then I think the key technology area probably is looking for ways to automate things and looking for ways to improve efficiency and productivity. I think a lot of the time what accountants are doing in their own practices can help clients do things more efficiently and more effectively themselves. So I think it's looking at ways to automate and do things more efficiently and effectively. And then, as I said, the client-accountant relationship can be spent, the time can be spent looking at business advice, looking at planning, looking at the future, looking at strategy, all that kind of stuff. And you can spend your time on those things, and the day-to-day running will hopefully happen a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, exactly. That sort of cloud-based technology. I was at a conference recently, and one of the sort of large car rental companies in the UK was talking to us about the fact it used to take them 20 days to do their sort of month-end accounts. So you basically have their accounts, 20 days after the end of the month, because obviously such a mixture of data. They brought in sort of cloud-based technology and some AI, and they were able to reduce that down to something like 10 hours. So giving business owners real-time information rather than being sort of looking at historical information is always the issue. And as you say, the ability of those lawyers and those accountants to be able to then utilize their time, rather than poring over long contracts, or rather than doing bank reconciliations, to actually help those business owners, which is really what those accountants and lawyers do best. And as you say, they're in the best place to actually bring in those technologies, because they are the ones that can build those systems best for those businesses. Well, we've come to the end of this webinar, so it's just left to me to thank Kirstin and Peter for your time. Really appreciate it. I think it's been hugely informative. I think the audience have really enjoyed understanding the sort of the technology, and thank you so much for putting it into our layman's terms for us mere mortals. So thank you very much for doing that. And it's just left for me really to say to everybody, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you at the next UKIBC webinar. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.